means of communication, social media platforms, welcome to today's sitting of the House. Thank you. Call of the roll.
Mr. Bartlett, Mr. Holness, Dr. Clark, Dr. Chang, Mr. Shaw, Mr. Samuda, Ms. Grange, Mrs. Williams, Mrs. Malawu Fort, Dr. Tufton, Mr. McKenzie, Mr. Chuck, Mr. Vaz, Mr. Warmington, Mr. Charles, Mr. Green, Mr. Morgan, Mr. Hutchinson, Mr. Terry Long, Miss Smith, Dr. Dunn, Mrs. Cuthbert Flynn, Mr. Main, Mr. Davis, Mr. Witter, Mr. Brown, Dr. Brown Burke, Dr. Charles, Mr. Chin, Mr. Clark, Mr. Cousins, Miss Crawford, Miss Daly, Miss Davis, Mr. Goldin, Mr. Graham, Dr. Guy, Miss Hamilton, Miss Hannah, Mr. Henriquez, Mr. Henry, Mr. Hilton, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Lawrence, Miss Lee, Mr. Miller, Mr. Montague, Miss Morrison, Mrs. Nita Garvey, Mr. Paulwell, Mr. Phillips, Dr. Phillips, Mr. Robertson, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Siblist, Mr. Slowly, Mrs. Vaz, Dr. Wheatley, Mr. Williams, Mr. Wilson, Mr. Wright.
Statement by, I would prefer to say, House Leader.
Madam Speaker, as is customary for the procedures relating to the sectoral debates, that we move the usual resolution that the agenda items for today be suspended and for the matter relating to public business to precede all other activities, so as to enable the members to make their presentations in the sectoral debate. And that is, therefore, Madam Speaker, the order that we're proposing for today. I also would like to use the opportunity to join you, Madam Speaker, in welcoming the members who are from the public sector, the private sector who are here, and other public sector persons too, who will support the minister in the presentation that will be made later on. Members of the constituencies of both Southwest St. Andrew and no doubt possibly North Central, students from the schools that you indicated. And finally, but by no means the least, Madam Speaker, to welcome you to the chair. And we know, as usual, that you always offer your astute guidance to the proceedings of the House when you are sitting for the substantive speaker, Madam Marissa Philibert. So, Madam Speaker, it is therefore my position to formally move the resolution that the items on the agenda be suspended to allow for public business in order to allow the speakers for today's sectoral debate.
The question is that the items on the agenda be suspended to facilitate the speakers in the sectoral debate today. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. We will now invite House Leader.
So, Madam Speaker, it is our intention to continue the sectoral debates today, having suspended yesterday. And the speakers today will be the Minister of Labour and Social Security, who will speak first, and then he'll be followed by the member for St. Andrews Southwestern. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, House Leader. We now invite the Minister of Labour and Social Security, Honourable Carl Samuda, to speak.
Madam Speaker, what a pleasure it is to see you in the chair this afternoon. I think you must have planned that just because you knew I was going to speak here today. Colleagues all, it is time for me to give a report. I like to term these things reports to Parliament on our stewardship over the past year at the Ministry of Labour and Social Security. But before I start, I noticed that there are many chairs empty. Perhaps the members have forgotten that this ministry they've forgotten that this ministry is responsible for dealing with farmers.
Exactly. Don't give them any.
I am here.
In addition,
And based on the number, Minister, I'm here.
in addition, a number of benefits. Absolutely. A number of benefits that flow to all members of Parliament also pass through the Ministry of Labour and Social Security. And one thing no one can accuse me of is having a short memory. My opposition member and counterpart, she is the opposition spokesman on Labour and Social Security. She gives me a hard time from time to time, but we have a good understanding. She understands me and I understand her. And it's born, Madam Speaker, over years of knowing each other and being associated with her. Madam Speaker, I'd like to also bring to your attention, the members of the House, the presence of our permanent secretary, Mrs. Robert Risden, Colette. I think most people would have met her before. After all, she has been the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Labour for 8 years, and she has been doing a very fine job. In addition, there are directors in the audience that have come to, in the event that I fall down, they'll be able to catch me up. I have to journey a distance, but nonetheless, those are the conditions under which we have to operate. But thank them all for coming. This I heard like yesterday, Madam Speaker, that I heard the member from Eastern Kingston and Port Royal with some pride, admittedly, deserve it, that he was celebrating his 26th year in this honorable house. Well, I rise to speak today on my 43rd. Years of consecutive membership of this house. But the most colorful part about my membership is that it has spanned both sides of the house. And from time to time, I have found that history very useful. But before I get into my presentation, I want to simply say that my years of service could not have been made possible without the assistance of my staff at the constituency office. The leaders of that staff is here with us, and they have worked assiduously over the years to give support, not just to me, but to the most important person in the constituency, as far as I'm concerned, and she's here with us today, my wife. She seldom, where is she gone? She seldom comes to power, but she follows it with a passion. She has been with me from before I became a member of parliament. When I ran in 1976 against my good friend's daddy, Dr. Ken McNeil, who taught me what it is like to be defeated and gave me the energy and the impetus to fight harder the next time. And the evening of that defeat, my wife, we visited one of our constituency leaders in Havendale, and believe you me, she cried like a baby. She cried, she couldn't stop crying. When we looked at the board, there was only one seat standing. Seat represents Wimborne. Yes, no, not here. No. West Kingston. And I said to her, made her a promise. And you will find this interesting, having fought for so many years in futility to beat me, my dear member from East Kingston and Port Royal. You will understand when I say that she has never, I told her she wouldn't, and she has never had to cry for that reason again. So it's good to be here. I have truly enjoyed the ride, and I continue to do so. Madam Speaker, I want to explain to you that commitment as a member of parliament is beyond the chambers of this house. It goes into areas where you make associations with people who have helped you along the way. And I see in the audience one such person who has been very close and offered the most tremendous and outstanding support, morally, physically, to me over the many years that we have known each other and engaged in the process of trying to help this country through public service. She's sitting right over there beside my wife, Mr. Donia Chin. No longer with me, she has moved on to Ed in the sector that he controls, tourism. But she has found it fit to come and to give me her support today, and I appreciate it. And finally, I want to thank all the persons who have worked closely with me in the Ministry of Labor, who continue to give of themselves selflessly spending many hours laboring over the issues that confront the country with respect to giving assistance to the poor and the needy. My secretaries, who have stood by my side and made my job a lot easier. And for that I say thank you very much. Madam Speaker, the Ministry of Labour and Social Security is committed to the vision of developing quality labour and social protection services using modern technology, international best practices, and sound advice to satisfy our clients and promote their social and economic empowerment. The events of the last 3 years have underscored the critical role that the ministry plays in providing opportunity, stability, and social protection. Recalling that this ministry was once a ministry of labor, but added to it, which is uniquely Jamaican, added to it the areas of social protection, which gives to the people who are sometimes not in the labor market, not in the labor pool, not as part of the employed population, the support they need to keep body and limb together and to try to do better in getting themselves fully employed and joining the labor force. As the country continues to rebound from the effects of the pandemic, we are redoubling our efforts to respond to the increasing demands for social protection, local and overseas employment opportunities, as well as the promotion of industrial harmony. The ministry has been challenged to deliver some of our services in keeping with our established timelines. This, Madam Speaker, is due in large part to our inability to retain a sufficient large cadre, as some people call it, of social workers. It's a demanding profession and one that is not available in abundance to satisfy the needs of a ministry of this size. With the recent salary adjustments, we are taking active steps to urgently fill all the vacant posts. Madam Speaker, for the 2023-24 fiscal year, in keeping with the government's national strategy and our priorities, the ministry has identified 5 strategic priorities that will guide our activities over the next 12 months. My ministry's portfolio is essentially consumer-driven. It's oriented towards benefiting consumers and customers that work and interact with us. Service excellence and committed leadership in customer service delivery are our most critical and urgent priority. It is essential that we deliver services to our clients with the right attitude in a more timely, and I emphasize the word timely, in a more timely and efficient manner if we are to truly meet their needs. Madam Speaker, we will be taking bold steps to enforce these standards as our new normal over the next 12 months. The identification of the most vulnerable is one of our priorities. We will continue to provide social protection services to the vulnerable groups within our population and seek to expand the range of these services, ensuring that we take every possible step to identify the individuals and families who are in need of those services. We will expand our efforts to promote the transitioning of our informal labor force to formality. Get away from informality and become more formal in our approach. We will also work assiduously with employers and employees to foster industrial harmony within the labor market, and we will take the necessary steps to improve employment services, labor productivity, and labor market information. They approved, to put all this in context, they approved estimates of expenditure for financial year 22-23. The ministry's budget for financial year 23-24 was greatly influenced by that amount that we got last year, which was 14.219 billion. This year, it is 16.977 billion. And we want to express our appreciation for that increase. We will be coming back for more, hopefully before the end of the financial year. Because we feel thankful for the 2.7 billion increase, but we find that it is a bit skimpy in terms of our demands. I want to express my appreciation to the government, of course, through our Minister of Finance, who has provided these funds for us in one-off grants to approximately 236,000 beneficiaries. I could never complain about the treatment that we have received at the hands of the Minister of Finance. And I always will remind my colleagues that it's a matter of being persistent, insistent, but careful. That was spent 1.6 billion in back-to-school assistance to 160,000 past beneficiary students, 523 million to 52,000 NIS pensioners, 189 million to just under 19,000 persons neither registered on PATH nor the National Insurance Scheme. These are the most vulnerable, with no way out, almost no hope. 7.6 million to 4,700 to children with disabilities, and a further 40 million to persons with advanced diabetes. I say advanced because many of us are walking around diabetic but don't know it. In terms of the ministry's priorities, of course, the legislative priorities still remain something of great concern to us, and I'm very sorry that my colleague Xavier, Minister Main, has left the ministry. He was a very great help to me as a lawyer himself. And he, in fact, was part of the committee that examined, parliamentary committee, interministerial committee that examined the Occupational Safety and Health Act. Unfortunately, Minister, I have to report that we are getting there, but not quite where we had expected to get by this time. Madam Speaker, the enactment of the Occupational Safety and Health Law is a long-standing matter which spans over 20 years. The Occupational Safety and Health Law is of great importance as it seeks to promote and protect the safety and health of all workers within the workplace. Madam Speaker, you may recall a bill was tabled in Parliament in 2017. And despite being considered by a joint select committee, so understand where my hand is pointing, both sides of the House, a joint select committee of Parliament, the number of concerns increased, led to the introduction of a new bill. At present, the ministry has received a first draft of the new bill, and further drafting instructions have been issued to the Office of the Parliamentary Counsel. While we are awaiting a second draft, the ministry continues to work assiduously to have the bill finalized and submitted to Parliament for its deliberation. So we are trying very hard. It's a tough and complex bill, and it's very knotty in parts, and will need a certain amount of consensus to move us forward. So I'm looking forward to that day. Madam Speaker, the Occupational Safety and Health Bill is very technical, as I said, but we are getting there. The Employment Agencies Regulation Act of 1957 is another matter. In 2014, Jamaica ratified the Maritime Labour Convention 2006, MLC 2006, you recall that too, Minister? Which establishes the basic rights of seafarers to decent work and the standards that are to be adhered to in their recruitment and employment. It's an area of great concern and one that is of great moment. We have to get it as well, get that piece of legislation through. The Ministry will therefore be amending the Employment Agencies Regulation Act 1957 to give effect to the standards established by the Convention, thereby ensuring employment protection for our seafarers. Amendments to the Minimum Wage Act, National Minimum Wage Order, and Employment Agencies Regulation Act is also one of the matters. Madam Speaker, as Jamaica continues to progressively realize the goal of achieving decent work for all workers, we are very proud of having ratified the Domestic Workers Convention C-189 in 2016, which establishes standards to ensure the effective promotion and protection of the rights of domestic workers. This one is very close to my heart because this union is led by one of the finest Jamaican women that I have had the pleasure of working with, Ms. Price. She's a great lady. And when she sits and explains to, when she sat and, first time I met her, she sat and explained to me her past. I was, I think, visibly moved. She has done a remarkable job. Shirley, congratulations. And I'll tell you better than that. She was, I think I might be speaking out of turn, but nonetheless, the Permanent Secretary is here to back me up. She's occupying premises at a location owned by the NIF, National Insurance Fund, but the Permanent Secretary and the Director spoke to me only very, very recently to say that while she loves this location, they believe they have found a better location. And she has, and I think she has visited, and she will love it, fall in love. It's bigger, better suited for what she has to do. Perfect location. God is good. In keeping with Jamaica's obligation under the Convention, the Ministry is working to amend the Minimum Wage Act, the National Minimum Wage Order, and the Employment Agencies Regulation Act to secure compliance with the Convention and to strengthen the protection of the domestic workers, as I said. That is a key for me. If nothing else, that's a key for me. Now, Madam Speaker, we are also responsible for issuing work permits. And we are doing some modernization. It's taking place so that we can execute the functions necessary to grant work permits in a more timely basis. During the past year, we processed 4,855 applications. Now, you know, a number of people think that we are giving away the shop, but it's not so. These are people who, because of not having enough professionals in the areas that are needed, we have to grant work permits. Of this summer, 1,843 were from new work permit applicants, while 2,246 were renewed work permit applicants. Of the remaining 766 applicants, 599 were for work permit extensions or exemptions, not extensions, exemptions, so that there are many persons in the religious fraternity and so on that don't need a work permit, and we permit those. And we had 776, 599 were of permit exemptions, while 167 were for marriage exemptions. So you get married to someone who's not a resident here or vice versa, and they make applications and we exempt that. We also processed 187 community CSME skills certificate applications and 11 rights of establishment applications. Madam Speaker, the processing time continues to be a cause of concern to all who have to engage the process. It is heavily paper-based and inefficient, taking as much as 6 to 8 weeks to process. We are therefore replacing the existing legacy work permit system with a new web-based, mobile-friendly work permit and skills certificate management system. The new system will facilitate investment in identified areas of need, since it will be informed by labor market intelligence, and it will facilitate the complete re-engineering of our work permit business process. The new system comes at a cost of $927,000 US. Probably that's the reason why it hasn't been implemented yet. Anyway, it is something that is very expensive, but we are working very hard on that, and we are in fact scheduled to complete it this year, the end of this 2023. We are hoping. The objective of our ministry, especially on the labor side, is the sustaining of harmonious labor relations and to have a sustained climate of harmony. So the little kerfuffle that took place a few days ago with myself and the misinterpretation of my intention, as I said then and I will say now, anything of that nature, never blame it on my heart, blame it on my head. And that is what happened then. But we have gone past, whatever. But we have gone past that now, Madam Speaker, and I think we are getting back to a normal environment where we will sit and reason and arrive at amicable solutions. And that will include my colleague from the opposition. During the financial year 22-23, we experienced a relatively turbulent industrial relations climate. Nobody could deny that. In addition to the usual flow of activities, several critical public sector entities including, and many people don't see the activities of the Ministry of Labor. You get the effect if we go wrong, but you very seldom see the extent of our involvement. For instance, our involvement in the National Water Commission issue, the Jamaica Civil Aviation Authority, Passport, Immigration and Citizens Agency, Speaker, National Housing Trust, teachers represented by the JTA, Jamaica Urban Transit Company, and the Registrar General's Department, who stage industrial action. We are the ones behind the scenes who conduct the conciliation process, where the first port of call, if there's a disagreement at the plant level, is to come and meet with our team at the ministry and try to resolve the issue at the ministry. If it can be, if it can't be, they extend it all the way up to me and ask me to join. I've joined on one very critical one until 2 o'clock in the morning. We resolved it and everything went fine. If it fails at that level, then a recommendation is made for the matter to be referred to the Industrial Disputes Tribunal. Let me just place on record here, in case there is some misunderstanding. Only in law, the Minister of Labour can refer a matter to the Industrial Disputes Tribunal. So nobody, and that matter cannot be done unilaterally and willy-nilly. You have to be, there has to be a reference point which is requesting that you do so. The minister will consider it with his advisors, conclude that it is the right thing to do under the circumstances, and then I will refer the matter. Thereafter, we have nothing to do with the matter. We can't talk to anybody on the disputes tribunal. And you know that more than anything else, member from Southern St. Andrew. You can't even say hello to them almost, because that matter has shifted to another level of authority. So speculation about I must do something, I must send it to the dispute tribunal, it cannot be done. My office does not have, I have no locus standi in the matter. Am I right, attorney? There you go. Given the unprecedented, and it is the word chosen, I asked questions about the word. I had questions about the word because I wasn't sure. Given the unprecedented demand for the Ministry's industrial relations and related services, we have responded by revisiting the existing structures in order to ensure that we are more responsive and efficient in providing support to both workers and employers. One hand can't clap. Workers and employers. This move also supports the planned expansion of the General Compliance Inspectorate to ensure adherence to the decent work agenda in Jamaica. Over the past year, issues affecting the industrial security sector came into sharp focus. Madam Speaker, we are pleased to report that there is now a greater level of stability and structure in the sector. There are issues, and there will be issues going forward, but it is more stable, with a better understanding and a better relationship all around. Approximately 85%, as I mentioned here in the last time I spoke on the matter in the House, approximately 85% of the engaged industrial security workers are under employment contracts with their firms, formal employment contracts. We are cognizant that there remains disquiet in some companies, and therefore, Madam Speaker, I am committed that the Ministry's Industrial Relations team will follow through to ensure that every worker's complaint is adequately addressed. I am proud to say, Madam Speaker, that during Workers' Week 2022, we completed the Workers' Monument in downtown Kingston by mounting on it the bust of activist Miss Aggie Bernard. And I had the pleasure, along with the Minister of Sports and everything, to put that bust in place and to celebrate the occasion. It is my deep hope there are two outstanding persons who have served over many years the Ministry of Labour in this country, and we're planning to do something special for those two people on either side of the House. You're looking at me, Mr. MP, on both sides of the House. Madam Speaker, I am pleased to report that throughout the difficult periods of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Ministry's Occupational Safety and Health team has worked diligently to preserve the safety and health of workers in all sectors. Now, this is despite the fact that the Act is not in place, but there are rules and modus operandi in dealing with safety at the workplace that have been adhered to. We have consistently surpassed our targets for inspections because we have a team that inspects all building structures, especially large hotels and so on. And we're seeking to reduce the occurrence of serious and fatal industrial actions. Madam Speaker, while we applaud the increase in construction projects island-wide, there has been some significant shortcomings on the part of contractors and developers in maintaining safety practices at the workplace. And we certainly are pursuing everything in our power to ensure that these occurrences are minimized. In response, Madam Speaker, the Ministry implemented a vigorous strategy for promoting increased awareness and compliance with safety and health regulations across industries, with particular emphasis on high-risk factories and construction projects. And you will notice that we have gotten 2 more members in the House, my colleague, friend,
so they'll get some farmers,
who is fully seized of what I said when I started. I have no doubt that he probably heard it on the television.
so he ran in here.
This strategy resulted in a 33% increase in the monitoring and inspection rate of construction projects in the 21-22 fiscal year, and a future increase of 17% in the 22-23 period. Over the past year, the Ministry received reports of 192 accidents compared to 221 in the previous year. So we are moving in the right direction, slowly but surely. Of this figure, 141 accidents occurred in factories as against 174 last year. Accidents at construction projects decreased by 1 from 43 to 42. It's insignificant in terms of numbers, but very critical as a direction. However, reported accidents on the docks more than doubled, moving from 4 in 2021 to 9 in 2022-23. You heard that, Minister? The docks. This is a cause of great concern. The number of reported facilities was reduced from the previous year's figure of 7 to 3. One occurred in a factory. Fatalities. One occurred in a factory, one at a construction project, and the other at the dock. Madam Speaker, I must emphasize that although there has been a reduction in the fatal rate across the industry, we are at this ministry certainly not satisfied with the numbers. We're not satisfied. We maintain that one fatal accident is one too many. We will be doing everything in our power to see to the correction of that level of occurrence. The program of advancement through health and education path is one of the most critical areas of the ministry. Madam Speaker, the government remains committed to providing social protection to Jamaican families through the program of advancement through health and education, short form PATH. In the 2022-23 financial year, the ministry provided income support of $9.5 billion to 130 families. So you can readily appreciate the significance of this program. Of this amount, approximately $2 billion was spent on back-to-school grants for PATH students. Many people in here are not even aware of it because there is little involvement in the process among members of Parliament. We increased the value of cash grants under the program by an average of 18.6%, and as a result, some 8.3 billion has been allocated in the 23-24 budget for benefit payments to families. So we have increased the amount. We'll be expecting to deliver more to the people. A further 458 million has been provided to assist students from PATH households to advance their education, improve their employability, and by extension, break the intergenerational cycle of poverty through post-secondary grants that will be provided to bring this about. Tertiary bursaries for those pursuing bachelor's degree programs. These bursaries are available to each eligible student for up to 4 years. Madam Speaker, I don't have to tell you the sense of pride, the level it becomes an emotional thing when you see a child from an impoverished family get a chance just by getting some financial assistance to complete their education in high school, and then you give them further assistance going through to university, and they turn out at the highest level of academic excellence. All of us in here have experiences with these type of children that are now doctors, practicing medical practitioners, right? Coming from behind scratch line. So it is of critical importance that this program continues at the rate it is and improve in the amount that is available. I want to speak directly to the parents and guardians of children who are receiving assistance through PATH. Use all the money you receive from PATH to support your children. Take them to the health centers for their checkups and send them to school every day so that they can be healthy and educated. Help your children to advance in life and secure brighter futures for themselves. Madam Speaker, we are mindful of the concerns that have been expressed as it relates to delays in conducting verification visits to families to complete their enrollment on the PATH program. And I think everybody can say aye to that. As I indicated, we are taking steps to urgently fill the vacant social worker positions and dispatch them to the field to conduct the PATH and other investigations. Madam Speaker, I turn now to one of the most significant programs that impact the lives of the most needy, the rehabilitation program. The government of Jamaica is committed to addressing the social protection needs of the most vulnerable Jamaicans. Those among us who earn so little that they are unable to take care of their financial obligations and come with concerns that are shocking, things that are necessary but unaffordable, funeral expenses, natural or man-made disasters, citizens who cannot find work, those who cannot work due to illness, people who are disabled, old age, or because they are tasked with the care of children and the sick and the elderly, with relatives who fall into those unfortunate categories. Families that have lost a breadwinner and those who have lost the means of making their own livelihoods through a variety of circumstances. Although the pandemic has subsided, the financial needs of many Jamaicans continue to escalate beyond their capacity to cope. Through the rehabilitation program, the ministry provides a range of grants to address some of the urgent financial needs that are related to these circumstances, such as grants that provide support for small or micro-income generating projects. Many of us as MPs in here don't know the extent or scope of that program. Compassionate grants to assist with urgent medical and funeral expenses.
Yes.
Emergency assistance to victims of disaster with the provision of cash grants and in-kind support such as food, toiletries, and bedding. And education and social intervention grants to help cover school-related expenses. For the first 7 months of 2022-23 fiscal year, the rehabilitation program spent approximately $253 million in grants, assisting some 5,648 families. Additionally, under the Special Economic Relief Program, we delivered grant payments totaling $169 million to just under 17,000 persons who were not registered under the program of advancement through health and education path. These persons were identified at the constituency level as facing severe economic hardships. And I take special pride in the fact that it was an initiative that I started when I learned of the situation, and we created a team of youngsters, unemployed, who would be surveying their communities to assist in this exercise. There are over 100 of them operating throughout Jamaica today. Now, our major plans for 23-24. Madam Speaker, for the upcoming year, we have identified a number of strategic priorities to strengthen our delivery of services. As I promised to do this when I came in here for the first time, I gave my first speech in this house. This place is hot, it's true? Do you have anything, Madam Speaker, that can cool us down a little? As I promised to do when I spoke in this honorable house on my appointment as Minister of Labour and Social Security, new strategies to address some of the historical concerns of members of Parliament as they seek assistance for their very needy constituencies will be introduced this year. These are expected to strengthen, or should I say improve, the level of collaboration between the people's representative, my parliamentary colleagues. We will therefore be undertaking a review of the policies governing the rehabilitation program designed to facilitate greater involvement of our parliamentarians. And I have to have a drink and give credit to my permanent secretary, who.
Minister's time for speaking has expired.
Madam Speaker, I now ask that the standing orders be suspended to allow the minister to complete his presentation, notwithstanding the time limit on speeches.
Stop drinking. I don't drink anymore. You know.
The question is that the minister be allowed sufficient time to complete his presentation. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
I thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank my colleagues. We will be allocating.
I like that, they're allocating.
Yeah, we will be allocating $200 million for members of Parliament to be utilized to address urgent needs of their constituents. In addition, we are increasing the allocation under the short-term poverty intervention program, which incidentally was started by a former colleague, Kellier, MP, Minister Kellier. We are moving this initiative from $1.5 million to $2 million for each member of Parliament. Also, Madam Speaker, in the coming weeks, each member of Parliament will receive the name and contact details of a social worker that has been assigned to their constituency. No business of now you see me, now you don't. They will be a permanent part of your constituency operation. We have to work closely to identify and assist the most needy in our society. And time is not on our side. Madam Speaker, we are on a mission to increase the socio-economic resilience of the most vulnerable in our country. The ministry launched the social pension program for elderly persons, that are persons over 75 years of age, in July 2021. Yes. We are happy to report that as of March 2023, 12,000 elderly persons who had no pension support are now benefiting under the program. Good program. And our brigade of more than 100 interns are in the field actively seeking to identify every eligible senior citizen to ensure that they are registered to receive assistance. This is what will be done in each constituency with additional help from the Ministry of Social Security. We are aware that some eligible seniors have been experiencing difficulty registering on the program owing to the lack of documentation. When I asked what documentation, I find that the documentation is the birth certificates. Madam Speaker, through a collaboration with the Registrar General's Department, the Ministry has taken steps to assist 2,000 elderly persons to obtain their birth certificates. Permit me to speak directly to my elderly brothers and sisters who need assistance. If you are 75 years of age or older and you are not receiving a pension or an allowance from the government, please accept my personal invitation to apply for assistance under the Social Pension Program.
Yes, yes.
The budgetary provision is in place. Nobody can tell you that you now have no money to give you help. Don't shy away from registration. Get in touch with your parish office, your Ministry of Labour and Social Security parish office, and we will provide the necessary support. Madam Speaker, another area of concern in documentation is lack of birth certificates. Nobody who is not in possession of a birth certificate must be denied assistance because of not having that piece of document.
Hear, hear.
That is Madam Speaker, the Special Intervention Program, SIP, maintains its objective of empowering the country's youth and providing them with sustainable employment opportunities, facilitating on-the-job training and nurturing and nutrition and culture and self-reliance through education and entrepreneurial support. For the financial year 22-23, 530 such youths were placed in short-term employment with private sector companies for periods of 6 months each allowing them to gain valuable work experience and earn an income. 33% of these young people came from households supported by PATH. These young people are the future of the country, and the ministry is deeply indebted to the numerous organizations that participate and collaborate with us to lift our young people from a state of welfare to lure them, and that lures them into crime and into being more productive citizens of the country. In addition to the employment component, the social intervention program includes an entrepreneurial and educational assistance component that emphasizes community service among participants. For the period April 2022 to March 2023, 345 youths were assisted to achieve their educational goals through educational assistance grants, PATH, totaling $44 million. 72% of this funding provided tertiary education support. Madam Speaker, the Skills Training Initiative under the program currently provides assistance to 627 persons from PATH households and pursue skill certification through a partnership with Heart NSTA Trust that pays them a stipend and transportation. Madam Speaker, the programs under the Ministry of Labor, for many, are programs that you're not aware of. That will come to an end once we get these social workers involved at the constituency level. And I'm going to now say probably what is a controversial thing. But at my age and stage, controversy is not something that I'm unfamiliar with. It occurred to me when I went to the ministry that one goes into politics to help to make life better for those who are in greatest need. You commit yourself to the people, you work hard, and you gain their support. That is the most noble thing any human being can do. They give you back their support and love. And then you come to Parliament. And in order to function as a member of Parliament, you have to stand right at that table and put your hand on a Bible and swear to assist the people in your constituency who need help. I don't know of any other area that anybody who works in any agency in government have to take that oath. Yet, people are in doubt as to the credibility of those who go through that process called members of Parliament. Worse yet, ministers of government at the highest level. So we do all of this and we work hard and we earn through our efforts with the assistance of the public sector and the private sector money to support the most vulnerable. And then what do we do in practice? We take all that money and we hand it to the bureaucrats to spend. They decide whether you get a loan or you don't. They decide how much you get as a benefit to help a poor person bury their loved one. And the member of Parliament is shunned because this member of Parliament has some stigma or something that prohibits him or her to participate in that process. That has to stop. I don't care. I really don't care who is going to come with some economic theory or some incredible propaganda to say what is bad about making the member of Parliament an integral part of the delivery of service and benefits to the poor. Right? So, we are making those changes. And I thank the Permanent Secretary for her support in the philosophy of it. Because everything starts with a philosophical background. So if you believe in the philosophy, and if you have confidence in your stewardship, you have to support this. I feel I know I could do that. It's true. Madam Speaker, she don't realize how true she is. Because the fact of the matter is, I've come to realize, having run out of time so long ago, and having such a large ministry, that I have to thank the people who are in it for their tremendous help. With all the challenges that they face, I have to say thanks every day for their support. They know I'm miserable. My wife, who is here, will confirm that. Yes. So I'm going to abbreviate some of what I had to say for another time. So I'm going to now go to an area of great concern to the country from both sides of the House, a little misguided in some instances, but nonetheless a very important part of us is the overseas employment. You will recall that there was a big kerfuffle about the treatment of our farm workers. And so I didn't come out on the good side of that, because I usually say things as truthfully as it occurred to me. And when asked about it, I said, with the level of criticism that I heard, having visited there, mark you a few farms, I said nothing jumped out at me that would equate to what I'm hearing. My opposite number took me on, and so I said, in light of that, and taking advice, as I always do, we sent out a fact-finding mission. That mission is the gold standard in terms of participants. You could hardly find a more qualified group. And also, you must also give me credit for selecting the cover, by the way.
Yeah, I was looking at that. It's like a holiday camp.
Yeah. And to cut deliberate. It reflects the charm and beauty of our people. Anything better than that? Oh, yes. She's a farm worker. She's on the job. No. This is a farm worker. They have women. They have women who work on the... They have women... Strawberry, they have women who work on the farm. Some of... I must say here, just very quickly, one of the persons who returned, one of the persons who made a big fuss about this treatment of our locals, identified a particular farm. I went to that farm. It wasn't the most tidy of them all, but it wasn't the worst by any means. Because, in fact, having left where they live, came over to the owner's house. And on his veranda, there were two large crates. One was full and the other was partially full, almost full. And they were full of things that they had, that through her savings and what have you, she had purchased to send home, because she was on the last leg and she was going home in a month or two, and she had these two massive crates on his veranda. This is the very farmer that they were abusing. No, I said to you, he was not the most diplomatic when he spoke. But the fact-finding mission went to that farm. But you will hear the results. Specific findings: over 70% of respondents believe that the treatment from their employer was either good or very good. 70%. When those who left, they felt that they were fairly treated, and rating increased to 90%. 90% felt that they were fairly treated. No, I am not saying that the place is perfect. By no means. No means. I'm not saying it's a perfect situation. As I would say that farming in Jamaica is not perfect either. But the fact of the matter is, when asked specifically if the farm owners treated them with respect, 87.1% said yes. 87.1%. In fact, on one of the farms identified as such, the workers, during focus groups and one-on-one meetings, because this was so extensive, they had focus groups, you don't just walk through and you form an opinion, rejected out of hand the notion that such conditions existed on their farm. That's the very farm that was identified as being so atrocious. The overall assessment of the conditions of the Jamaican farm workers were described as good. Discovered, however, were pockets of poor labor and industrial relation conditions, particularly outside of Ontario. The province of Ontario is responsible for the majority of our farm workers, by far. From our own assessment, this is a quote, from our own assessment, we were able to observe a deep sense of, and I want this House to listen to this, we were able to observe a deep sense of pride and fulfillment among the vast majority of farm workers. This is a gold standard committee. A gold standard committee. 73.7% stated that they willingly worked on their days off in order to earn more money, not by force. Only 2.5% felt as if they were being forced. 2.5%. 70% of the contracts range between 5 and 8 months. Well, we know that, and we're trying to get it extended, but it's a weather thing. With just under 30% on 8-month contracts. We want to extend more on 8th month, but that depends on the type of crops. 85% said they were never transferred between farms during the period of their contract, and those who were transferred stated that transfers were due to the completion of work on their previous farm. In other words, until them farm and them done work on the farm, they are never transferred. And how it works in practice is that they welcome, where if a farmer is finished with his crop, he sends them over to the next one to help the other farm. So they earn extra. 60% said they worked exclusively in the fields. 8.8% worked in greenhouses. 7.6% worked in packing houses. It's a variety of activities. Approximately 93.6% said that they do not work when ill. If they're sick, they do not work. 93.6% said that, yet the reports that you read say, well, when they're sick, they're forced to work. Among those who worked during illness, 21% said they did so because they feared of losing their jobs. 21%. 35% of respondents sought health care, and of that number, 10.4% said they did not receive access to health care. Only 10%. They sought health care. Only 10% said they didn't receive health care. That is 90% said they receive health care. The reasons for this was assessed as being due to non-insurance of health cards, non-acceptance of health cards by doctors, and the exclusion of certain health coverage like tooth extraction from the coverage. In terms of living conditions that were condemned out of hand, conditions vary across Canada. In Ontario, most of the workers rated their living conditions as between good and very good. That's where the majority of farm workers are. 7% of respondents gave positive reviews of their housing and living conditions, with 30% saying they were excellent and 40% saying they were very good. In terms of cooking facilities, 30% said excellent and 48% said very good. In terms of bathroom facilities, 24% said excellent, 44.8% said good, a total of 69.2%. When asked if the housing facilities were clean upon their arrival, 95% of them said yes. 95. But there are challenges, and I would never come here and mislead this Honourable House by saying there weren't challenges. One of the challenges that we face, and steps have already begun to take shape as to what we are doing about it. We are acting on it. Fifth, in terms of the assessment of the liaison service, the people who go and visit these farms, 55% said satisfactory. 52% of the women were dissatisfied and 45% of the men. But overall, 55% was satisfied. 74.4% were satisfied with the services in Ontario, which is the majority area, which had a negative rating of 6.6%. 11.3% were satisfied in British Columbia, with a 38.7% negative rating. That has to be addressed, and we have already taken steps to deal with that. 10.1% in Nova Scotia, and 19% negative rating in Nova Scotia. Only 10.1% in Nova Scotia, which is in need of urgent attention. 5% in New Brunswick and Quebec. The responsiveness, willingness to interact with the workers is the main reason. So the liaison service has to address these weaknesses, and we are, through the ministry, dealing with it, and will be making changes where necessary and making new additions. 70% had been on the program before. So when you look at the list of persons who have been on the program, understand that 70 or so, 75% are people who are returning. 90% said their preparation before leaving Jamaica was positive and helpful, so that we prepare them for the journey ahead, explain to them what they're getting involved in, and 90% of them said that the preparation was very helpful and positive. 87.7% said the experience rated from fair to excellent. Only 12.4% rated as bad or very bad their experience. 25% of workers said they received no visits nor treatment by the liaison officer. That has to change. 25%. No visits. They have every resource you can imagine. You want a job as a liaison officer, what you want? Talk about member of parliament. You think it's party them, Aaron?
Minister, though you have been granted leave by the House, to speak until completion. Yes, time is also critical. You have about 5 minutes to go. Thank you very much, Minister.
We would like longer service in the program. That is the most important at the moment, so that people can get an opportunity to earn more, bring back more, and help their families. Madam Speaker, I am not intending to utilize the 5 minutes other than to say that the other areas in the ministry that we are responsible for will have to be the subject of another debate, because the areas are so many, so complex, so involved, not to say anything about the National Insurance Fund that covers a vast portfolio, the Productivity Center, the Council of Disabilities, and we just completed the Disabilities Tribunal, which will give teeth to the determination as to how well they comply with the treatment of the disabled. There are many areas that we have to speak about that ought to be of great national importance. In addition, I think we have circulated the data, statistical data, so you can go right through. So, Madam Speaker, with that, I thank you for your patience and your support and everything that goes with it, of being the Speaker of the
Excellent
House
presentation,
today.
Minister.
Thank you all very much. And God bless you.
We will now invite the Member of Parliament for St. Andrews Southwestern to make her presentation. Could you please assist? I know you will not need any guidance, Member Brown-Burke, but just a reminder following from the former speaker. We have 30 minutes with some leeway to complete the presentation.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'm one of those who I allow experience to teach me wisdom. And so today, as I begin, I just want to, if I can find my first page. Oh gosh. If you give me a minute, Madam Speaker, I don't know where my first page is.
No problem at all. No, we don't have to start counting time.
Madam Speaker, allow me to start, first of all, by thanking the taker and giver of life, who exhorts us to give thanks unto the Lord, for he is good, for his mercy endureth forever. So today I say thanks to him. I also had intended to thank the speaker that you are representing today for her guidance and patience, and thanks to the able staff of the Houses of Parliament, who really have made the work that we do here so much easier with their professional support and dedication. Madam Speaker, I have been chosen by the people of St. Andrews Southwest to serve as their Member of Parliament and their representative. I am therefore always conscious of their concerns, their hopes, and aspirations whenever I speak. I commit to continue being faithful to their cause and to act with integrity and humility. To my Southwest family, some of whom are in the House today, I say thank you for your continued confidence in me. In advocating for and representing Southwest St. Andrew, I have had to lean on the support, advice, and assistance from my three councillors, Eugene Kelly, Carl Blake, Audrey Smith-Facey, my constituency secretary, Mr. Ellis, and the rest of the team. Today, Madam Speaker, I place on record my gratitude to them for their unwavering support and advice. I would also like to specially thank my office and support team, Lexi, Gail, Doreen, Marcia, Juby, and Nash, who have been extraordinary in my quest to provide consistent and quality representation. I must also thank, Madam Speaker, the most Honourable Portia Simpson-Miller, without whom I would not be standing here today. I thank her for her faith and confidence in me to continue the tremendous advocacy and representation for which she's known during her 40 years of service to Southwest St. Andrew. A million thanks also to all those Jamaicans who offered prayers and well wishes during her recent hospitalization. We continue to pray for God's blessings for her. To the opposition leader, Mr. Mark Golding, thanks for entrusting me with the portfolio of Labour and Social Security, especially at this time when our workers are demanding greater protection from the government and a just and fair system for them to live, work, raise families, and do business with dignity and pride. Madam Speaker, to the members of the Task Force on Labour and Social Security who have been assisting me to advocate for a more equitable Jamaica where we all feel valued and respected, I thank them for their contribution to the rock we call home. Last but not least, I thank my family for their unconditional support and love, especially my husband and sons. My dear Papa, my sisters, and other members of the family who are often called upon to shoulder responsibilities for which they did not sign up. Madam Speaker, the Minister of Finance came to Parliament and boldly declared that Jamaicans are better off now than before. At the same time, the Prime Minister also took many of us to task for suggesting that things are not as rosy as they made it seem. Madam Speaker, I understand the conundrum and why it's easy for some members in this House to think that everything is hunky-dory. They have no clue what Bob Marley meant when he said, "Rain a fall, but the dust it off." Rockstone has never been their pillow. They have never gone to bed with saucer crackers and some mint tea. I know those stories well, Madam Speaker. As Bunty says, poor people fed up, and you know the rest. Every Jamaican knows that if you owe a man and you agree that you're going to pay him each week, and you have made allowances in it from the little money that you get, and then you see that you have a little extra, it makes sense to buy a little more rice, a little more flour. That way, the children will be assured of a cooked meal, and they don't have to go hungry. Or maybe you can buy Alaska porridge so they can go to school with a little breakfast in their belly. Madam Speaker, this is what the Leader of Opposition meant when he spoke about cushioning the crisis, allowing them an opportunity to do a little bit more of some basic things. Our families, our workers, our youths, and our seniors are struggling to survive. It is particularly more difficult for them if they are living with disabilities, on fixed income, or in the informal economy. Madam Speaker, despite the thumping of desks and glee from the government benches, approximately 54% of Jamaicans still think that things are moving in the wrong direction. Jamaicans from all walks of life have been saying that all is not well. I've seen some in high office accuse them of being unpatriotic, but we know better. Against that background, Madam Speaker, my contribution today is made on behalf of those Jamaicans who are tired of government badness. The teachers, including those in early childhood, the sector, policemen and women of the Jamaica Constabulary Force, and other civil servants who, even though they have signed, are not pleased with how they have been treated. The lack of communication and disrespect when things go awry is unbecoming of good governance. This year, we have seen unprecedented unrest, industrial unrest, with disruptions in almost every sector. So, Madam Speaker, I speak on behalf of Misha, a mother of 4, who can barely put food on the table for her children. I speak on behalf of children with disabilities experiencing high levels of unemployment when compared to their able-bodied counterparts. I speak on behalf of those pensioners who welcome the 74% increase in weekly payments, but who know that $3,000 per week still means that they can't afford some basic items for their survival. And then they still have to deal with health care. These are the hard truths we must face when we talk about the Jamaican reality. Madam Speaker, as people flee our shores for a better life, and we have seen so many of that in the newspaper, we also hear members of the private sector and the Prime Minister himself saying that they can't find people to work, and suggesting that we need to look at importing labor. At the same time, the government talks about the lowest unemployment rate and the tightness in our labor market. Not much is said, though, about the 35.5% of the working age population considered economically inactive or outside of the labor force. It means, therefore, that before we think of importing labor, we need to really understand what's happening with these 35.5% Jamaicans. What is really responsible for this large number of disconnected individuals? What is the role of HEART and other workforce programs in resolving the situation? And why can't they train and certify more Jamaicans to meet the needs of industry? These are the questions that we need to answer. Madam Speaker, these answers are important to fashioning solutions for the current labor force concerns, and it also needs leadership and political will. Madam Speaker, truth is, in many ways, the conditions of labor still mirror economic structures on the plantation, with emphasis on low-wage employment and a large informal sector representing as much as 40% of total economic activity. And when you think of all of that, Madam Speaker, it means that we have to ensure that there's protection for our workers. But I'll come back to that. Madam Speaker, I want to deal with the issue of farm workers up front. And I will read from my prepared text because I know how much time I have and I will not divert by anything I've heard here today. Many Jamaicans were shocked at the initial responses coming from the Minister regarding complaints by our farm workers, who were asking for reasonable protection, acceptable working and living conditions, a safe and confidential, listen to this, a safe and confidential mechanism to report issues, an assurance of independent investigations, and a pathway to residency as a way of protecting their rights as workers. It has taken almost 1 year for us to have the Minister return with an update in the form of comments on the report, and he has tabled the report here today. The truth is, we need some details, and I'm not sure if they're in the report or not. I've not had a chance to read it, as you would imagine. We want to make sure that the farms from where there were complaints that they were visited. We want to know if there's a satisfactory program for periodic inspections to evaluate living and working conditions by our liaison officers or others. We also want to know if the open letter to the minister was actually used in terms of going to those farms and those workers to see what were the details of their complaints. Minister, the message from family members is that they are watching. And let us be clear. We all understand the importance of the Overseas Farm Workers Program. I have seen the difference it has made in the lives of many Jamaicans, particularly in rural Jamaica. And I know, too, that there are many farms offering excellent living and working conditions. But, Madam Speaker, the real problem is the response and attitude of the minister, who should simply have acknowledged the complaints that were made and moved speedily to send a team to investigate, including the meeting with signatories of the complaints. Madam Speaker, talking about farm workers, I want to put on record the tremendous contribution of the Most Honorable Portia Simpson-Miller. She was determined to ensure that Jamaicans participating in the program could actually be processed with dignity. Based on her tremendous work, Sister P, I am inviting the Minister to name the Overseas Employment Center in her honor, based on all of the work that she has done. No, which prior knowledge? Madam Speaker, let me deal with the issue of the security guards. The backbone of the security infrastructure in Jamaica, approximately 30,000 strong, some will say. Last September, Justice Batts ruled that security guards who were employed under similar conditions as those at Maximum were employees and entitled to full benefits. At this point, Madam Speaker, I want to use the opportunity to thank the security guards and their advocates, especially Mr. Vincent Morrison, for standing up for their rights. The protests, press releases, interviews, and engagement are finally bearing fruit.
Yes, ma'am.
After several months, we now have the minister using his leverage, as was suggested by the leader of opposition months ago. We welcome the decision, Minister, to meet with the security guards and the team to oversee the establishment of the Joint Industrial Council for the industry. Minister would also like to hear the terms of reference, and we hope they will move with dispatch. Because, you see, it is still critical for us to ask companies under the present circumstances to cease any punitive action until matters can be dealt with. This may mean some initial discussions immediately, as it would be a travesty if the courageous workers who stepped forward to bring their plight to the public were to be victimized in the process. The protection of these workers and others who have not yet signed should be a priority. I would ask the Minister to issue clear instructions to all security officers as to how to proceed, to detail the process available to them for redress or clarification around the terms and conditions of their contracts. Minister, I have also indicated to you that information from some of the smaller companies and those trying to comply during this transition is that the current contract sum that has been agreed between the government and some of the larger companies are clearly impossible if the minimum wage of $14,000 is to be applied and benefits are to be granted to these guards. The net effect, of course, is that it would force many of the small businesses out of town. The feeling is, Minister, that the government is teaming up with the big boys and the other small ones are getting shafted. This cannot be allowed to happen. So I want to ask you, Minister, to pay specific attention to that matter and to investigate that. Minister, I also want to say to you that I think that you have failed the security guards by taking as long as you have to arrive at the decisions you did while ignoring them. Time will not permit me to place on record some of the provisions in the contracts, and we have been talking about that for quite some time. In any case, I think that we have been on record about the level of injustice that some of the provisions in these contracts represent. You see, Madam Speaker, it is important that the contract doesn't just say it's a contract of employment, but rather that you go through the provisions to make sure that it doesn't deny the workers of rights that they have in law. The present precarious position of many of the security guards, quite frankly, occurred, Minister, because of the hands-off approach that the Minister of Labour and the current government chose. I believe that the time has come for a new direction for industrial relations in Jamaica. Madam Speaker, the Minister missed an ideal opportunity to tackle the long overdue structural reform to protect all workers who are being denied their full rights as employees under the guise of contract work. In fact, there are several categories of workers who face similar conditions as companies hide behind this fixed-term contract to deny them basic rights. Whether it is the hotel industry, the wholesale janitors, orderlies, even ancillary staff at some of our schools fall in that category. The Minister is on record that he will fix this issue for those working with government, but that is really not enough. The government must ensure that all workers are covered by the laws of Jamaica, and wherever there are breaches occurring, the government needs to ensure that it is resolved. Mr. Golding is already on record that if it's not done now, the People's National Party will fix it when we next form government. But if we are to be honest, the approach of the entire government has been strange. Yes, the compensation review has been an ambitious program, but that's exactly why there should have been greater openness and transparency and a more inclusive and collaborative approach from government. But again, we are not the same. The People's National Party has a strong record of defending workers and championing important progressive laws. That is who we are. And that is the reason why we say time come for a new direction in industrial relations, one that is more harmonious. Livable wage. Let me use the opportunity to welcome the increase in minimum wage that has been announced by the government. True, it's not the 100% increase that was promised back in 2016, 7 years ago. Yes, it is not. In fact, this increase of 44% is nowhere near what was expected from them in their campaign promise back then. But that is where we are. Madam Speaker, the Leader of Opposition and our spokesperson on finance have both been on record as well, calling for a livable wage. And we are hoping that the government will begin the discussions that could get us there. Again, if it's not done, when the next PNP government comes to office, we will ensure that there is a livable wage. Madam Speaker, I understand that there are some government agencies that routinely sign contracts with service providers who are not able to pay their workers a minimum wage. When workers inquire, they are told that the company is waiting on a decision from Cabinet. So, Minister, I'm calling on the government of Jamaica to lead by example and ensure that the contract sums keep pace with the increases of minimum wage, so that the third-party companies are able to actually pay them, because they claim that is currently not being done. The truth is, we need a minister who is quick to respond to issues facing workers, a minister with a keen interest that is fully engaged in reaching a settlement in disputes between business leaders and workers and their representatives. Madam Speaker, today we have workers, industrial relations practitioners, business leaders yearning for the days when the minister showed a real interest in improving the industrial relations climate. At this point, no one can be blamed for coming to the conclusion, Minister, that there is no interest in these issues, or that you don't care or simply cannot manage your portfolio responsibilities. The truth is, the minister has failed our farm workers, he has failed our security guards, he has failed in the promise to meet the minimum wage increase that was promised of 100%. So what is left? You didn't hear that before. Yes. Yes, in 2016. In 2016. It is 77 years hence. Minister, time come either for a new Minister of Labour or a new approach to Labour. The truth, though, is that the silence of the Prime Minister in the face of these failures place him too under the spotlight. And the assessment is not favourable at all. In fact, many are thinking that time come for a new Prime Minister as well. Madam Speaker, I think most Jamaicans will readily agree that there are serious poverty, inequality and exclusion issues that have resulted in Jamaicans feeling isolated on the margins of society. This inequity is maintained by an education system that is sharply divided along socio-economic lines. The opposition spokesperson on finance reminded us in his contribution to the budget debate that 20% of our population is estimated to live below the poverty line and 30% live in informal settlements. It is becoming more and more obvious that the working class is becoming the working poor. And that has implications for the kind of support and protection strategy that need to be developed. Madam Speaker, when we speak of sustainable development, we focus on the economic issues. And these days, the environmental issues have become sexy and fashionable. However, we often ignore the third component, which is the social component. It isn't until social cohesion is threatened and we become concerned with negative behaviors like indiscipline, crime and violence, and deteriorating social norms that we become concerned. We are often moved to action focusing on the manifestation of these issues, but not what is at the center of our dysfunction: the exclusion, systematic inequalities, and the stigmatization. And so with that, Madam Speaker, I turn to the issue of persons with disabilities. Madam Speaker, every report I've read indicates that persons with disabilities are disproportionately represented amongst the poorest, the unemployed, low-waged, and with low health status and lower levels of educational achievement. This is true that this is not unique to Jamaica. However, in Jamaica, persons with disabilities are also faced with issues of stigma, discrimination, marginalization, and social exclusion, and are often forced to or believe that they need to live in the margins of society. I am often told by parents and family members that when we as policymakers speak, there isn't much said about persons with disabilities. And that often the only ministry that might speak about that is the Ministry of Labour and Social Security. We need to move beyond that, because the single greatest task that is facing us as a country is to build an inclusive society. We must create conditions for persons with disabilities to see Jamaica as the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. I heard the minister speak about the Disabilities Rights Tribunal, and I am glad that we are moving closer, because the truth of the matter is that without the establishment of the Disabilities Rights Tribunal, the law becomes almost a paper tiger and a symbolic move and nothing else. In terms of education, the highest level of education attained by most persons with disabilities is primary education, which indicates that there is significant work still to be done in terms of ensuring accessible infrastructure, adequate resources, and trained teachers. Healthcare. Access to healthcare is also limited for a number of persons with disabilities, again, due to the issues of accessibility. The truth is that we have to call on our municipal corporations to ensure that the provisions in the Building Act actually are monitored, and that the new building designs also conform with the rights that are guaranteed to persons with disabilities. Madam Speaker, I want to talk now. I want to move a little bit now to the issues of our seniors. Madam Speaker, it cannot be such a difficult task for the government to put a plan in place that calculates and pays pensions on time. I'm totally baffled how you're able to calculate your pre-retirement leave, approve the effective date of the leave and effective date of retirement, and paying the actual pension still seems to be a mystery. I still get seniors complaining constantly about the lack of communication around payment of benefits and the callous and disrespectful manner with which they are often treated. Late payments occur with little or no notice, and inquiries are treated as if they are a nuisance. The ministry must be able to develop a mechanism of communicating with our seniors about these delays. A few days make a big difference when you are on fixed income, which doesn't leave much room for the bare necessities plus the healthcare needs that face many of them. Madam Speaker, the Minister of National Security says that they are leading in integrating technology into their operations. So maybe some consultation between the Ministry of Labour and Social Security with the Ministry of National Security could yield to some kind of improvement in how we communicate with persons. Madam Speaker, in terms of path,
the member's time for speaking has expired. House Leader.
Madam Speaker, in keeping with your comment earlier on, Madam Speaker, and the understanding that the member has, I beg to move that she be allowed to wind up and complete her presentation. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
The question is that the member be allowed 10 minutes to complete her presentation. Those in favor? Those in favor? So you need 10 minutes. So you need 10 minutes. So yes. Those in favor?
Thank you very much.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Madam Speaker, After the experience last year with you and I have no intention of asking for a minute over the 10 minutes. As MPs, we all have heard of the difficulties. Thank you very much, colleagues. We all know of the issues with getting people on the PART program, and we have heard from the Minister about some issues that are going to be done. Minister, I'm still concerned that we cannot get an effective partnership between the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Labour and Social Security to deal with our children on path. Despite what he said when I come in here and ask the questions, there are still too many guidance counselors who turn to us as MPs and corporate sponsors to deal with children who are in need. Yes? Yeah, especially for food. So we need to find another way of doing that. Madam Speaker, this Andrew Holness-led administration has failed to deliver to the most vulnerable amongst us. The most Honourable Portia Simpson-Miller often spoke about balancing the books while balancing people's lives. This profound concept of the role of government about equity and creating an inclusive society is what I believe is missing in what we are seeing. These, I agree, are foundational principles of the PNP, and the next PNP government under Mark Golding is fully committed to ensuring this balance. You see, we understand that the duty of a responsible government is to design its policies and programs to effectively cover those that are most in need. Time comes for a new direction in our approach to poverty reduction. The main issue that faces us in terms of the programs that we're doing, the lack of appropriate social protection interventions, is the lack of capacity to deliver the social services, and also the fact that most of our programs do not focus on the root cause of poverty, but rather they focus on the consequences of poverty. When you do that, you really don't have an opportunity to break that intergenerational cycle of poverty. Madam Speaker, I would have loved to speak a little bit about the importance of decolonization, because I believe that it is at the heart and soul of making sure that Jamaicans who come from the background that we come from, many of whom look like me, with hair like me, speak like me, that they can become proud of their Africanness. If we are to talk about decolonization, that too has to be part of what we talk about, so that they can feel proud, we can feel proud of who we are and of how we speak, so that we can learn the history of our ancestors, so that we understand where we come from. Our African people in Jamaica constitute the poorest and most vulnerable under our monarchy, and will still be at the lowest economic rung in the new Republic of Jamaica unless they are made to feel proud of both our ethnicity and our nationality. Madam Speaker, throughout the history of the People's National Party, we have been true to the cause of workers. We have brought legislation from minimum wage in 1974, equal pay for equal work, the right to be unionized under the LRIDA, compulsory recognition of trade union and compensation for unfair dismissal through the IDT. That's our history. That's right. Our PNP government understands that harmony is essential to good industrial relations, and we are convinced that only through an inclusive society can there be any real shared prosperity. So the next PNP government, Madam Speaker, will make the necessary legislative changes to remove any ambiguity about the definition of workers and their conditions of employment. Yeah. The next PNP government will undertake a series of reforms to ensure greater social protection for Jamaicans working in the informal economy. We will encourage the establishment of joint industrial councils in industries where there are high levels of employment, but there is no common standard for working conditions and no union representation. We will bring comprehensive legislation to eliminate abusive contractual arrangements that deprive employees of their rights. We will ensure that regular national labor market surveys are done to determine the demand for jobs and the factors affecting availability of components and a productive workforce. We will ensure that the content and methods of training through HART, CPTC, and other training institutions are evidence-based and data-driven. And we will treat actively with the stigmatization and discrimination faced by persons with disability through robust public education. The next PNP government will ensure that local authorities allocate resources to ensure that the construction of all new buildings adhere to the provisions in the Building Act and are in keeping, as I said, with our commitment to access to persons with disability. We will also ensure that greater resources are provided to increase the educational performance of persons with disability. Some of that sometimes just simply include specific training of our teachers. The next PNP government will place emphasis on preparing persons with disabilities for employment. We will also review our national pension scheme to ensure sustainability and impact. And we will review national health insurance schemes to ensure broader and more effective coverage. Madam Speaker, we will undertake a comprehensive review of the social protection programs such as PATH to ensure improved targeting and broader coverage. Madam Speaker, fellow Jamaicans, as I have said and I have shown, it is time for us as a nation to chart a new direction for labor in Jamaica. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Member House Leader.
Madam Speaker, I rise to who's by theirs? Okay, Madam Speaker, I rise to thank the two members for the outstanding presentations that they made today, and also to wish the member from St. Andrew Southwest a very happy birthday. Oh, and just to indicate, I'm advised that the Deputy House Leader and Minister of Gender Affairs, Sports and Culture, her birthday is tomorrow. So since we won't be here tomorrow, we want to wish her in advance. Happy birthday, happy birthday. It's a wonderful day for everybody. I tell you, Madam Speaker, I beg to move, therefore, that the sectoral debate be suspended until May 2nd, when the speakers would be the Minister of Justice and the Minister of Agriculture. May it please the Madam Speaker.
The question is that the sectoral debate be suspended. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. House Leader.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move for the recommittal of all the items on the agenda which gave way to public business. May it please the Madam Speaker.
The question is that we move to the recommittal of the items listed on the agenda prior to their suspension. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. Statement by ministers. Announcements.
Laid on the table of the House today are copies of the Ministry of Labour and Social Security Statistical Supplement for the financial year 2022-2023.
Bills brought from the Senate, petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally, questions and answers to questions, motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice, motions relating to the sitting of the House, motion for leave of the leave to introduce bills, presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained, public business.
Madam Speaker, it is not intended to do any further business for the day. I therefore invite you to adjourn this Honourable House until May 2nd at 2 p.m. for the continuation of the sectoral debate. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
The question is that the House do now adjourn for Tuesday, May 2nd, 2023 at 2 p.m. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. This Honourable House now stands adjourned.